chapter about talking about then what is the first life form? How does it first life come about? Okay, so is it really a random chance of all the material put it together? We don't know. Evolution doesn't tell you how the first life form arise. Okay, so there is still the question about, is it really life form is created, or is just random chance of, so that's different area. Evolution doesn't explain all about that. Okay, what we know is we have evidences, enough evidences to say with our knowledge that all the life form comes from one life form. Okay, that's all we can say about evolution. Okay, so chapter 17 and 18 will conclude this semester. Okay, the class is today, and then we'll go through chapter 17 and 18. Next week we'll go through from 11 to 18 review. Okay, will be short class, and then week after we'll have final. Okay, so today is the last lecture. Chapter 17, the means of evolution, microevolution. The question is, then we said it's evolving, everything is evolving. And what is exactly that evolves? Okay, what is the unit of evolution? Okay, so the smallest unit that evolved is a population. Okay, you don't say its individual is evolving. No, the smallest unit is a population. Okay, so we first of this class talk about what is population. Okay, population is defined as all the members. Okay, all the members of a single species. Okay, living in a defined geographical area at a given time. So, Korean population or human population. Okay, that's the smallest unit that can evolve. What do you mean by that population is evolving? Because we know molecular biology. Okay, so what is evolving actually? Okay, for example, in this case, this frog was living in this area. So the population of this frog, okay, lived here. Okay, what if something happened and then this habitat is divided into two? Okay, and then population A and population B was physically separated, and many years has passed, and then somehow the coloring of this frog was changing. One become lighter because the forest was a little bit not thick enough, or the other forest is very thick and they don't have enough lights, so it's better to have dark coloration. Okay, and this is we're going to talk about in this chapter, how this population can evolve. Okay, what is it then? Basis of this evolution. What is it exactly evolving in terms of molecular biology? Okay, genetic basis of evolution. We can think about genetics a little bit. Okay, genes exist in variant forms called alleles. Do you remember this word? Alleles. So how many alleles do you have for a given gene? How many alleles do you have for a given gene? 1, 2, 3. Right. Each of you have 2 alleles for one gene. Why? One allele is coming from your father. One allele is coming from your mother. You can have only 2 alleles. Easy example is your blood type, right? If you're O type, you have OO. If you're AB, you have 1A and 1B. That's 2 you can have. But we can think about, in this population, how many alleles there for blood type? A, B, O. There are 3 types of alleles just for ABO blood type. Okay? So that's what it means. Okay? In most species, no individual will possess more than 2 alleles. Each individual will have 2 alleles. For example, humans have 2 alleles. Okay? But a population, okay, a population can have more than 2, many alleles. Okay? Let's say your genes that determine our hair color. Okay? There can be many different alleles, but we can have only 2. Okay? Now, as a population, we can think about this many different alleles. Okay? We can call it gene pool. Okay? It's like swimming pool with many different alleles. Okay? That's the basis of genetic evolution. Okay? What does that mean? Okay? The sum of all alleles of population is referred to as the populations of gene pool. Okay? For example, Korean population have certain type of alleles, okay, for hair colors. Probably mostly black hairs. A few light color like brown. I didn't dye, it's my natural color. Okay? So, but then Caucasians, they have different pool of genes, alleles for hair color, right? Some blonde, some red, okay? So the basis of evolution, okay, is a change in a frequency of allele in a gene pool, okay? What do you mean by that? If the population is evolving, means the frequency of allele is changing, okay? That's the concept of evolution in a population. Okay? Get it? It's a very important concept. If you don't understand, we can go one more. For example, let's say Korean population has blood type ABO, right? AB and ABO. And then they somehow change it, okay? And they become all O type, okay? That's kind of evolving. It's not a good example, but okay. And so what caused this change? What caused this frequency of alleles? Okay, evolution as a change in the frequency of alleles. We can talk about 5 or 6. Oh, okay. So going back to that frog color. Okay. For example, this, let's say chromosome, is it true frog has 4 sets of chromosomes? No, I don't know. But let's say chromosome 3 has a gene, okay, in this position that can determine color of frog, let's assume, okay? And let's say this frog has 2 alleles, okay, which is A1 and A2. That expressed as a dark coloring, okay? Different frog has different alleles, A2 and A4, okay? That cause this a little bit lighter coloring, okay? So evolution in terms of this frequency of allele is how many alleles is there in population, okay? The changes depends on the environment, okay, that cause the difference in frequency of alleles, okay? So the extent that a given set of alleles increase in frequency from one generation to the next within population, the phenotype or the observable characteristics produced by those alleles will be exhibited to a greater extent within the population. So the frequency is getting higher, then it will show up as a phenotype. For example, coloring our hair, our height or weight, whatever, okay, which is based, if it is based on genes, if it has genetic base, then it will show up, okay? Okay. Did you get it? No? Okay. So with such a change, population can be said to have evolved. In other words, the population is evolving means the change in the frequency of alleles, okay, is changing. Okay? So evolution at this level is called microevolution. So we can look at in the genetic level, then it's microevolution. Okay? The change of allele frequency within the population over a relatively short period of time. What is that? The opposite of microevolution. It's called macroevolution. Okay, it's a bigger picture. In other words, how this species can become different species starting from the same species. If they change enough, and then they become two different species, and then over a longer period of time, it's called macroevolution. It's evolution that results in the formation of new species or large grouping of living things. We'll come back. That's next chapter, chapter 18. Okay. Chapter 17 is about microevolution. What is microevolution? It's the change in frequency of alleles. We're looking at the genetic level. What's the inside of individuals? What is the allele frequency and how this is changing as population is evolving? Okay, that's microevolution. Okay. So there's 5 agents, okay, for this microevolution. Okay. The first one is called mutation. Second one is called gene flow. Third one is called genetic drift. Fourth one is called sexual selection. The final is natural selection. We'll go through one by one. Okay? If you can understand, if you cannot understand, you can ask, I can repeat. Okay? So mutation, what is mutation? We heard about it, right? Mutation is change in base sequence, right? Sequence from AT pair becomes GC pair, or some chromosome is deleted or duplicated or inverted. There are many different types of mutations, okay? But mutation is it's called alteration in organisms' DNA. Okay, it's base change or chromosome change, okay? Usually this mutation is harmful, okay, or no effect at best. Okay, usually it's harmful or deleterious, but not very open. Sometimes this mutation can be advantageous, okay? That is driving force of evolution. In other words, if the organism keeps this genetic information always the same, there will be no difference, right? There's no genetic difference. But somehow difference is caused by this base change. Genetic information has been changed, has been modified. Okay, that's the first one. Okay, so mutation is any permanent alteration in an organism's DNA, and some mutations are heritable. What do you mean? Why only some mutations are heritable? In other words, the other mutations are not heritable. Why? What is heritable? What can you pass on to next generation? Let's say during the summer you got very hot suntan, okay? Some of your skin cells, and then inside the nucleus, there is a mutation because of UV ray. There is a mutation, right? Is that mutation heritable? No, that's it. You may have cancer because of that skin, but that's it. It's your body, okay? You will not pass on to your children. only the mutation happens in your germ cell, right? Sperm or egg. Then that mutation is heritable, right? So that's what it means. Some mutations are heritable, okay? Meaning they can be passed from one generation to next generation, okay? So we talked about mutations, okay? So this was original sequence, ATGGTA, okay? But sometimes the DNA polymerase makes mistakes and change this one into GC, not in just one, but two steps. It can change. So information has been changed. Okay, this type of mutation, they call it point mutation because one base change. Okay, sometimes nothing happened because this information is not used to make protein, but sometimes it's bad. For example, sickle cell anemia. In case one base change, they change one amino acid, they change the whole structure of protein, they'll change whole shape of red blood cell. Okay? In many cases, it's deleterious. If you have it, you have bad effect. But not very often. But sometimes this mutation become advantageous. Okay? So, or big deletion of chromosome, which is more serious problem. But, okay, this type of mutation is the driving force of microevolution. Okay. So mutation happens fairly infrequently. Okay, you don't have to worry about too much. Okay, and most mutations either have no effect or harmful. Okay, but rare adaptive mutations are vital. Okay, without those mutations, without changing in the DNA information, there's no evolution. Okay, there's no difference. Okay, is that they are the only means by which entire new genetic information comes into being. In other words, in order to make difference, you have to change the DNA sequence. Okay. All right? Got it? Okay, second one is called gene flow. Gene flow is flowing from one place to another. It's easy concept, right? Gene is flowing. How gene can flow? So somebody has to move from one place to another. Okay? So gene flow is like, this is California, a plant called tarwitz in California. And this is very similar plant in Hawaii. So what happened is from North America, this seed of this plant travel long distance by birds or by any means, and then landed in Hawaii. And they become a little bit much different from here, but that's the gene flow. Okay, good example is animal case, it's immigration or emigration. So in other words, Korean people immigrate to the United States and they get married to other, race and then interbreeding. Okay, it means Korean gene population of Korean gene is flow to other places. Okay, the opposite is true. We have more foreign workers coming into Korea, and they get married, and they have children, and the new gene has been flowed into. Okay? So gene flow is easy to understand. Okay? The third one is a little bit tricky. Okay? Genetic drift. Okay, what is drift? What is drift? Drifting means 뭐라고? 우리말로? 표류하는 거야? There's no directionality. It's just drifting away. Okay? It's by random. It's by chance. Okay? So we'll see what genetic drift. Genetic drift is by chance. the alteration of allele frequency in population has its greatest effect on small population. Okay, the key concept is this is effective when the population is small. Okay, so what do you mean by that? Okay, let's think about this penguin population. Let's say you have 10,000 penguin here. Okay, and if you look at the penguin, they look all black. Okay, only 10% of them are red. I never saw red penguin, but let's say red penguins. Okay, so allele frequency is about 10%. Okay, 10% of the population is red because they have the gene is different from black one. Okay, let's say they had disaster. Okay, that the ice broke into half, and they all fell into the water. They didn't swim. They couldn't swim. They all died. Okay, so you have half of the population. Okay, and you count the red penguin. Okay, there's still about same frequency, about 9%, 10%. Okay, because the chance of the big population, the red penguin is evenly distributed, right? But if we consider small population, let's say you have only 10 penguin, that's the population, and still same frequency, 1 out of 10 is the red one. Okay, and what happened is the ice broke, and the half fell off, and they die. What happened? Now there's no more red penguin. Okay, so in other words, the allele frequency has been changed for red one. Okay, so it's called genetic drift. Okay, so in other words, if you can define genetic drift, it's just by chance. By chance, the frequency of allele frequency is changed just by chance. Okay, they didn't mean it, but it happened. Okay, so the effect is much, much bigger on small population. Okay, so there's two cases. It's called bottleneck effect or the founder effect. It's the same case, but it's a little bit different, so you have to follow. Okay, the number one is, so genetic drift can have large effect on small population through common scenarios. The first scenario is called bottleneck effect. So bottleneck, okay, the first of this is bottleneck effect, defined as change in allele frequency due to change during a sharp decrease of sharp reduction on a population size. Okay, so you can have this. If you can understand this drawing, you can understand. Okay, in the bottle you have all different kinds of candy. Okay, but candy is a little bit big, and you want to take it out. You shake it, and it doesn't come out well because of it has very, very narrow neck called bottleneck. Okay, you have only a few came out. Okay, it happened to be all red, 2 reds and 1 yellow. Okay, and you let it go, and your population grow. And this allele frequency is quite different from original one. Original one had green, yellow, other colors, but now you don't have those colors. You lost all the frequencies. It's, in other words, big picture is genetic drift. By chance, it happened. Okay, why? Because of bottleneck. In other words, sharp reduction in population. Okay, if you go to San Francisco, okay, have anybody been to San Francisco? Pier 39 is a popular tourist place. If you go there, you see a lot of sea lions. Yeah, sea lions. Okay. So in United States, what happened was you could hunt for these sea lions. Okay, and they killed many sea lions. Okay, the original population probably had many different alleles. Okay, And what happened is the population reduced very, very sharply, and only a few survived. Okay? And then they realized that they're going to kill all of them. Okay? They so stop hunting. Okay? And let them breed. Okay? And the population grew. Okay? Then what happened was, at this point, if you take out DNA from those sea lions, okay, and then if you compare, interestingly, all the alleles are very, very similar. Okay? They don't have many different alleles for the genes. Okay? So what happened is, probably original, we don't know, but probably original population had many different alleles, many different colors. But they killed them, all of them. Okay? And then only a few left. Okay? And they start to breed, and then the allele frequency was very, very different from original one. Okay? Only a few alleles are there. Okay? So it's called a bottleneck effect. Okay? The bigger one is called genetic drift. Okay? Understood? Yes? No? Second case is called founder effect. It's very similar. Okay? Founder effect. Founder means the beginning. Someone start the small population or something like that. Okay? The second is the founder effect, the fact that when a small subpopulation migrates to a new area to start new population, it is likely to bring on with it only a portion of the original population's gene pool. What do you mean by that? This is a movie story, but it's a very old movie, as old as your age. It's called Witness. No, nobody saw it. Harrison Ford, you know the actor? Okay, he was very young at that movie. Okay, so Witness is, so somebody witnessed the mother, okay, and then that boy was in danger because gangsters tried to kill him because he was the witness, 목격자. Okay, so Harrison Ford was a cop, so his job was to protect the witness. Okay, so he entered into this village called Amish people. Have you heard about Amish? Okay, it's a religious people, and they don't use any modern tools. They don't drive. They still use horse. There's no electricity, nothing. Okay, if you go to Pennsylvania, there's still a village of that people, Amish people. Okay, the problem is they don't meet other peoples. Within the village, they married each other. Okay, so that is a good example of this founder effect. Okay, if you test those people, they have very high frequency of genetic diseases. Okay, for example, this rare genetic disease is called cornea plana. It's an eye problem. Okay, it's a very, very rare genetic disease. Only 113 people worldwide, the whole world, only 100 people are affected with this disease. And then out of 113, 78 you can find in Finland. So what happened? Okay, in old days, about 400 years ago, a small population moved into that area. And one person probably of the population had that disease. Okay, and they intermarried, and then the population, because they didn't have enough different alleles for that gene. Okay, so it's called founder effect. Okay, all right? Yes, no, sleepy? Okay. Okay, next one is interesting one, sexual selection. Okay, so there's a mutation, what was it? Gene flow, genetic drift. Next one is sexual selection. Probably this is the strongest selection for you guys, okay? Because you are at the peak of your your reproductive period. Okay? So what is sexual selection? Okay? Sexual selection is a form of natural selection, which is next one, but it's a form of natural selection that can affect the frequency of allele in gene pool. What do you mean? If you married and if you have more children, you're contributing more alleles to the population, right? But these days only 2 or 3. In my generation, I'm the youngest of 7 children. 7 was not that rare at that time. Okay? It occurs when difference in reproductive success arise because of differential success in mating. In order to reproduce more, you have to mate more partners. Okay, a given male in a population, okay, may, for example, sire many more offspring than the average male in population. Okay, if so, this male's allele will increase in frequency in the next generation of the population. That's the sexual selection. So who selects? Okay, usually female selects the male, or if it is a population there is a dominant male mate all the females, then usually they fight each other, and then the winner gets all the female. Okay. So in this case, this bird, this is male, okay, is having bigger chest will be selected by female, or they have louder voice, okay? But think about this phenotype. In other words, some birds more colorful color will be selected, okay? But at the same time, those characters will be very easy target for the predators. Okay, what does that mean then? In order to have that colorful outfit and can survive, which means he's probably the fittest or fastest, or maybe that's the way it goes. Okay, so the sexual selection is the but only this works if it is a sexual reproduction. In other words, it has to have male and female case. What about bacteria? They don't have male and female, okay? The sexual selection doesn't apply to them, okay? Higher animals, okay? What about human? Do we have sexual selection? Yes. I told you the reproductive strategy is quite different between male and female, right? Male, you have to you produce more numbers of sperm. So in other words, your strategy is to, well, in animal case, you have to mate more with more females than to reproduce more, okay? But in female case, you have only a few eggs. Okay? You have to be very, very selective, okay? Because that will be depends on who you mate with, okay? Whom you mate with, okay? But what about human? Okay, we have institution called marriage, okay? So it's a little bit different, okay? But, well, we can talk about later. Okay, next one is natural selection. Okay, in a population, some individuals will be more successful than others in surviving, okay? Hence, the reproducing owing to traits that better adapt them to their environment, okay? The phenomenon is called natural selection. But you have to be careful about natural selection, okay? So, in other words, it's called survivor of the fittest, okay? But what do you mean by fittest? Okay, does it mean the better ones or more superior character, that's not the case. Okay, the success depends on only how many progenies you can leave behind, or what characters are more advantageous for the reproductive success. Okay, so in animal case, let's see actual case. Okay, so people studied these birds, finch, okay, 참새 종류. Okay, and this is the population. Okay, number of individuals, and this is y-axis is the number of individuals. Okay, they had a big population in 1976. I don't know where this place was. Okay, and this x-axis is the depth of beak. In other words, this one. Okay, from 6 millimeters to 13. It's normal distribution. Okay, it's a polygenic trait. Probably many genes are affecting this big depth. Okay, so what happened is there was a big drought. 1977 drought means there was no rain. Okay, there was nothing to, not enough food for this bird. Okay, what happened is next year they checked it. Okay, and the depth of beak has been changed. Okay, not dramatically, but it changed, shift to right side. What does that mean? Within 1 or 2 years, the birds with bigger beak was more advantageous to survive because there is not enough food, so they have to find other foods which is hard to crack it. Okay, so they have to have stronger beak. Okay, that's what it means. Okay, so in other words, because of the drought, okay, some character was more advantageous to survive. Okay, that's what we see in this one. So it's called natural selections. Okay, so natural selections and evolutionary fitness. Okay. So the phrase I said, the survivor of the fittest. Okay, 적자 생존? Yeah. Survivor of the fittest is misleading. So you have to be very, very careful about it. Okay, because it implies that evolution works to produce generally superior beings. In other words, those survived are somehow, you may think it's superior to other individuals. Okay, or successful competitors in any environment, but that's not the case. It's very specific to environment and very specific traits. Okay, in other words, this survivor is better in all the aspects. That's not the case. Okay, it's only better in specific area. Okay, so evolutional fitness, however, has to do only with the relative reproductive success of individual in a given environment at a given time. Okay. So one individual is said to be more fit than another to the extent that it has more offspring than another. Okay. Individuals not born with invariable levels of fitness, instead, fitness can be changed in accordance with change in the surrounding environment. Okay, so this final selection is the nature. Okay, that doesn't count whether you are good looking or better. You know, it doesn't matter. Okay, the specific conditions will select specific traits. Okay, that trait become more advantageous in reproducing more progeny. Okay, that's the natural selections. Okay, we have to, a few more slides. Okay, this is not that bad, okay? So 5 more minutes, then we'll have break, okay? So there is a 3 mode of natural selection, Okay, the first one is stabilizing selection. Okay, second one is directional selection. And third one is disruptive selection. If you look at the graph, you will understand. The stabilizing selection is like this. Okay, always there is a various population in any given traits. Okay, stabilizing selection is you selecting for the medium. Okay. The other one is directional selection. Somehow you go towards one extreme. Okay, you're moving into one direction, either this way or this way. Okay, that's directional selection. The third one is they favor on both extremes. Okay, so what happens is eventually you will have two different peaks. If you go this way further away, then probably you will have two different population. Okay, eventually you will have two different species, maybe. Don't know. Okay, but there's three different types of selection. You can understand it. Okay, first one is stabilizing selection moves a given character in a population toward intermediate, in the middle forms, and hence tends to preserve the status quo. In other words, the environment is very, very stable. Okay, there is nothing much change, and then the medium is become advantageous. Okay, good example is human birth. Okay, the baby. Okay, this is the birth weight in pounds. Okay, how much a newborn baby weighs? 애기 몸무게? 3.5kg? It's a big baby, kind of big. 3.4kg, 3kg. Okay, 10 pounds is about 4.5, 4.5. 10 pound은 4.5kg. Okay, this is the weight. Okay, the other graph is infant death rate. Okay, born, but they don't survive. Okay, the graph goes like this. Okay, in other words, if the baby is too small, they don't survive. They're too big, it's not good either, because they cannot come out from mother. Okay, if you have too big head, it's very difficult. For example, my first son, my wife had the labor for 24 hours or something like that. It's very difficult. Okay, so what happened is it's stabilizing. It selects medium-sized baby is the highest in terms of infant survivability. Okay, but probably this is true for in developing countries. They don't have techniques. They don't have hospitals. Then, if the baby is too big, then probably the mother cannot survive. Okay. The baby is too light, okay, then they cannot survive outside mother. Okay, they have to go to incubator, but still, the death rate is very, very high. So, in other words, the selection goes into middle. Okay, so this is what? Stabilizing selection. Second one is directional selection. It goes to one direction. Okay, good example is the evolution of hominoids, in other words, human-like species. Okay, they studied the fossil records, and they have this cranial capacity, which means the size in the brain. Okay, the emptiness of skull. Okay, so if you measure those capacity, okay, it's your head is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, so it's one direction. It goes one direction. It's directional. Okay, the last one is disruptive selection. Okay, it goes two extremes. It's not very common. It's a little bit rare. Okay, in this case, this bird lives in Africa somewhere. Okay, and then they studied again the depth of this beak, the size of their beak. Okay, what happened is there is a dry season in this area, okay? And they have two types of food for this bird, okay? One is soft little seed, and the other one is bigger, but it's very hard seed, okay? So what happened is these birds, their size of beak, okay, going towards the two extreme, okay? One type, they go smaller beak. They're adapted for soft seed, soft food. They are better at eating those. Okay. The other extreme is bigger beak, and they can break this hard seed. Okay. There is no in between. If you have intermediate, you're not good at eating small food. You're not good at eating hard, big food. So you're left behind. So in other words, it goes two different ways. Okay? It's a case of disruptive selection. Okay, the last chapter was the outcomes of evolution, macroevolution. It's not very interesting chapter, but 영어로 하니까 다 자던데. 자, 봅시다. Okay, let's go. So what is a species? A good question. What is species? Okay. What is 종? Okay. Human, what is human species? How can you define species? Okay. So it's a definition. Okay. Species are a group of actually, or potentially the interbreeding. This is keyword, interbreeding. Okay. Natural populations that are reproductively isolated from other such groups. In other words, if you interbreed, if you can marry or whatever, you can have children, they're one species. Okay, but what if some zoo succeeded in breeding between tiger and lion? Right? Are they same species? No, they're different species, but they are not naturally breeding. Okay, right? So also they have, so this definition is very kind of not perfect because it's very difficult whether they can interbreed or not. Okay, but whatever, this is the definition for species. Okay, good example. If you interbreed between horse and donkey, what happened? 말하고 당나귀하고, which it will produce mule, but they are sterile. They cannot have their babies. Okay, which is suggesting horse and donkey are two different species. Okay, so that's the definition. Okay, but this only works for sexual reproduction. In other words, male and female breed and the next generation. But nevertheless, this is the definition of species. Keyword is interbreeding. Okay, whether they can reproduce next generation. Okay, so they look very similar, but they are different species. Okay. If you are in the lumber business, you cut down the tree and you sell, that's your business. And if you see this owl, you're panic, because in U.S. or northern Canada, if you find this species in the forest, you are not allowed to cut the trees because they are endangered species. Okay. But they very, very look similar. But this one, we have enough of it. You can cut the tree. You can kill some of them. It's fine. Okay? So, Earth's organisms are so varied that this definition does not apply all of them. Okay? Only organisms that multiply through sexual reproduction. So male and female. Okay? For example, bacteria or archaea, they just split. Okay? So you cannot define species by whether they can, interbreed or not. It's very difficult in bacteria or archaea to define this is one species, this is different species. Very difficult. Okay. how does new species arise? So question is, if it is one species right now, then how different species arise? Okay. So the whole thing is, the most important factor is geographical separation. Okay, physical barrier. Okay, they separated and spend enough time. They change themselves too much. When they meet together, they cannot interbreed anymore. Then they become two different species. Okay, so the big thing is geographical separation. Okay, so that the new word is called allopatric speciation. Speciation means you're making new species. Okay, speciation is you're making new species. How? Allopatric. Patric means place. Patric means place. We talked about this word, allosteric. Do you remember? Allosteric. Right, it's different place, not the same place. It's different places because changing their places, that's why it becomes two different species. It's called allopatric speciation. The opposite concept is called sympatric speciation. Sym, S-Y-M, the same place. They live in the same place, but still two different species. They become two different species. It's called sympatric speciation. But allopatric speciation is more common. I told you geographical separation is more important. Okay. Example, this salamander, okay, was originally one species. Okay. And somehow they migrated through California. Okay. But then two subpopulations took the different path. Okay, one population goes to the coastal, the other is inland. Okay, they change, they go through a lot of change. At the end, long time has passed, and they meet each other, and they don't breed each other. Now you have two different species. It's called allopatric speciation. Okay, so the main idea is geographical separation. Okay, but even if you separate it geographically, you just don't become two different species. You have to accumulate some change, some differences. Okay, DNA differences, other differences. You have to change this difference. Okay, so following geographical separation, population of the same species must develop internal characteristics that will keep them from interbreeding should they be united. If they meet each other again, and if they cannot breed because they become too different, okay, then it becomes speciation. Good example, the squirrel, okay, they look a little bit different, okay, they live in different places where I recommend, if you have chance, you go to the United States, go to this place. It's called Grand Canyon. Okay, so south rim of Canyon. This is canyon. This is big space in between. Okay, this part is South Canyon, and that part is North Canyon, and it's separation. You cannot jump from here to there. Okay, so the two different species live in two different. Probably they coming from one species. Okay, so that's extrinsic. Extrinsic means environment from outside. Okay, but also there is some intrinsic factors, okay, which is not that obvious in some cases. Okay, ecological, temporal, behavior, mechanical, gametic isolation, hybrid inviability or infertility. Okay, so the last one is hybrid inviability or infertility. I told you if you interbreed between horse and donkey, remember Shrek? There's talking donkey, right? That's donkey. If you breed between horse and donkey, it becomes mule. Why bother to breed this one? Mules are very strong. They can carry lots of luggage. Okay, although they cannot run that fast like horses, but they can carry lots of luggage. That's why they interbreed male, but they are sterile. They cannot have their babies. Okay, so this is a table. You can go through different intrinsic, this extrinsic, the outside environment. The most common one is geographical isolation. The rest of it is intrinsic. Okay, so ecological, they have to live in different places. It can be geographical separation, but temporal isolation. Temporal means time difference. Okay, so they can change. Or temporal. Okay, behavior isolation. So one of the sexual selection is there is a courtship. Okay, birds, they can sing, they can dance. Okay, again, so dance is very old and instinctive behavior that can attract the opposite sex. Okay, for example, I don't know about female dancing, but male, if you can dance well, you can have lots of girlfriend. In my theory, okay, because it's dance is very old behavior attraction for the opposite sex. Do you agree? Maybe not. I think that's my thought. Okay. So mechanical isolation, if it is too big, too small, they cannot mate. Okay. Gametic isolation, sperm and egg. Sperm swim to the egg, but there is a chemistry has to be met. Okay. Between different species, they use different proteins that can recognize their own species sperm versus egg. Okay. So that has to be matched. Okay. The last one is, I told you, hybrid inviability or infertility in case of mule. Okay. Now, the second word that I told you, it's called sympatric speciation. What is that sympatric? They live in the same place, but still they become two different species. Okay. It's very, very rare, but it happens. Okay. So this fly, okay, it's a type of fruit fly, okay. So if you read the story, it's something like this. When United States, when some country imported the apple tree, okay, this one type of this fruit fly came with apple, okay, and then there is other fruits other than apple. They become ripe in different timing. In other words, they become the fruits become 오늘은 영어가 잘 안 되네. So in other words, the time difference between the apples mature and the other fruits mature, there is a difference. Okay. For example, one of the fruit fly had probably hatched early and they become mature, and they become early adults, and the apple didn't mature yet. They didn't have any food, so they decided to go on eat other fruits. Okay, and then that's how the first speciation become, and then later those subpopulation become hatch early. The timing was different, although they live in the same place. Okay, usually the food is another important factor. Okay, and they become different and different. They become two different species because of timing of the food, although they live in the same place. Okay, that's the case of sympatric speciation. Now, in other words, okay, it's called adaptive radiation. What do you mean adaptive radiation? It's different words, difficult words. Okay, what is radiation? Radiation means it shoots out all the rays. Okay, radiation. Adaptive radiation means somehow the environment is very, very good. Okay? Then what happens is this animal or insect or become spreading out a lot. Okay? And they become many, many different species. Just like you're shooting like rays. Okay? That's called adaptive radiation. Okay? So in other words, speciation is more likely to occur when a species is introduced to an environment in which few other species of its kind exist. In other words, there is no competition. Then you can thrive. Okay? Let's say you have your job is computer graphic. Okay? But if you go to New York City, you will meet thousands of computer graphic designers. Very, very competitive. But if you go to some places, nobody is doing computer graphic. You will get good job there. Right? It's the same thing. If you go to environment, there is no competition, then you will thrive. Okay? Same thing. So species go into new places, and they can become many, many different species because they can populate very fast. Okay? What do you call it? It's called adaptive radiation. Okay? So in other words, in this situation that lead to very, very rapid specialization, in other words, speciation, and then it becomes adaptive radiation. Okay? So this series of event is known as adaptive radiation, the rapid emergence of many species from a single species. Okay? Example, again, this fruit fly in Hawaii. Okay? The whole species in world, I don't remember how many, 500 species? No, maybe more species there. But in Hawaii, the species of Drosophila is about 25% of the whole world. In other words, there's so many different species in Hawaii. So why? Because first, fruit fly came to Hawaii with some fruit, I guess. And they don't have enough predator to eat them. So there is no much competition. And then they become many, many different fruit fly species. Okay? So it's an example of adaptive radiation. Okay? So then the next question is, how long do you have to wait until one species become two different species? In other words, what is the time of becoming new species? The pace of speciation. Okay? The answer is it depends. Okay? Some species takes millions and millions of years to become two different species. Some species become very, very fast. Okay? So in this case, this fish become two different species, although they live in one lake. Okay? It's example of what? Is it sympatric speciation or allopatric speciation? I told you they live in the same lake. It's sympatric, right? But they live in a different place. One is surface, the other was the bottom of it. Okay? And then they become two different species. Okay? Polyploidy. We talked about this polyploidy. Okay, what is polyploidy? What is diploid? What is haploid? We are diploid. Yes, we have two sets of chromosomes. Okay? Polyploidy means you have many sets of chromosomes. Okay? In plants, this polyploidy gives advantage. What is the advantage? Usually they give bigger fruits. Okay? Also, if they have polyploidy, they have better chance to become two different species. Okay? So polyploidy is one way to make new species, mostly in plant, not in animals. Okay? That's all you have to remember about.
A key concept in classifying life forms is the notion of species. Today, the most commonly accepted definition of this term stems from the biological species concept, which bases classifications on breeding behavior. In the words of the evolutionary biologist Ernst Mayr, species are groups of actually or potentially interbreeding natural populations, which are reproductively isolated from other such groups. The transformation of one species into another over time is known as speciation. When a parent species diverges into two or more species, the mode of speciation is called cladogenesis. Gradual change from one species to another without branching is called anogenesis. A central factor in speciation is the development of reproductive isolating mechanisms, factors that in nature prevent interbreeding between individuals of the same species or of closely related species. One form of reproductive isolating mechanism is the geographic isolation that can separate populations. Geographic isolation is an extrinsic isolating mechanism because it involves barriers that are not part of the organisms affected. When geographical barriers divide populations and those of populations go on to become different species, the result is allopatric speciation. Note that for allopatric separation to occur, however, populations must also develop intrinsic reproductive isolating mechanisms, defined as changes in their form or behavior that prevent them from interbreeding. The table at the left describes various forms of extrinsic and intrinsic isolating mechanisms. A multiplication of the normal two sets of chromosomes to some other set number is known as polyploidy. Speciation can occur by polyploidy and is particularly important in plants. Speciation through polyploidy is an example of sympatric speciation. This is speciation that occurs even though a population is not geographically isolated. The adjacent animation illustrates how polyploidy can lead to a new species of wheat. 1. Gamete formation. Gametes, egg and sperm, are formed in the different species. 2. Fertilization. These gametes fuse in fertilization to form a zygote, a single cell that will develop into a new plant. Such a mixed species generally develops into a sterile plant because its chromosomes cannot pair up correctly when the plant produces its own gametes during meiosis. 3. Doubling of chromosomes without dividing. The zygote doubles its chromosomes in preparation for cell division, but then fails to divide. With this doubling, each chromosome now has a compatible homologous chromosome to pair with during meiosis. 4. Gamete formation. Gamete formation thus takes place in the plant, and these gametes from the same plant then fuse, because this is a self-fertilizing plant. With this, a new generation of wheat plant has been produced, one that is a different species from either parent generation, because each of the parent species has 2 pairs of chromosomes, while this new hybrid species has 4 pairs.
The last one was a little bit difficult one. Did you understand? No. Polyploidy is important for new species, speciation, right? Why? It's a little bit complicated. Think about why the mule, the hybrid between horse and donkey, become sterile. Okay, let's say if you have 2 different sets of chromosomes, horse and donkey, okay, and your hybrid is you get 1 set from horse, 1 set from donkey, right? What if the set doesn't match? The set doesn't match. Then next generation, they have to have pair to split, right? So if you have mismatch, you become sterile, okay? So one way to solve that problem in plant is just doubling it. You have one, you don't have pair, you just make it double. And now you have pair. In the next generation, you will go through meiosis. You can make gametes. Okay, if you understand that, you understood. Okay, so the last part is so also it's a little bit complicated, but so since we have so many species, how do we group them? How do we call them? That's the question. Okay, so how do we call it? Human being, we call it Homo sapiens. Okay, it's called binomial nomenclature. Nomenclature, how to name it? Binomial, you write two names to call it. Okay, this was proposed by 린네. 린네의 이명법. Okay, so what do you call it? The first one is called the genus name. Okay, 속명. The second one is the name of species, 종명. Okay, the name of genus, you write it capital letter. Name of species, you have small letter. Homo sapiens, H is large capital, sapiens is small s. Okay, remember, you have to remember that one. Okay, so there's more groupings. Okay, so species is the smallest group. Next one is what? Genus. Next one is family, order, class, phylum, kingdom. How do you remember? 개, 문, 광, 목과 속, 종. Okay, that's from bigger to smaller. Okay, species, genus, family. So example. Okay, so how many of you have cats? Okay, the name of cat in two words, binomial nomenclature, Felis domestica. Felis domestica. What is the first word? Felis, capital letter, 대문자, domestica, small letter. All has to be italicized. Okay, that's the name of cat. Okay, species is domestica. We have to domestic. You keep them in house. Okay, Felis is the 고양이 속. Okay, family 고양이 과. Okay, order carnivora 뭐 육식 동물 목 뭐 정도. Okay, class mammalia 포유류 강. Okay, phylum chordata 척추동물 문. Okay, and then animal kingdom. Okay, so I don't ask you to remember all of them, but you have to know which one is bigger. Maybe I will ask which one is the biggest group between genus, order, phylum. What is the biggest group? Phylum, right? Okay. So classifying living things is not an easy. Okay, people try to group them. Okay, there's two ways to do it: old ways, new ways. The old ways is called systematics or classification. 분류학. Okay, classification. Okay. So new way is called cladistics. Okay, so classic taxonomy, classification or taxonomy, systematics, same thing, all 분류학. Okay, new one is called cladistics. Okay, so what is the difference? The cladistics ask a simple question whether it has something, has it or not have it, or not have it. Okay, for example, cladogram is based on cladistics. Okay, so the question is whether do they have 4 legs, yes or no. Okay, they don't have it, you have it. Okay, next question is whether they feed their baby with milk, yes or no. That's mammals. Okay, whether they eat meat or not. Carnivorous, yes, no. Or do they live in water, yes or no. Okay, So cladistics are more subjective. Okay. No, objective. Okay, sorry, objective. 객관적. Okay, objective. Okay. Classical taxonomy and classification systematics are more based on they look together, they look very similar, they don't look very similar. It's based on more subjective criteria. Okay? So based on that, you can have totally different the outcome. This is a classical view of relationship. In other words, reptiles, turtle, snake, lizard, crocodile, dinosaurs, reptiles. And then they put bird right next to it, okay? And then mammals, okay? But if you change the way we look at it, cladistics, its result is different, okay? Mammals and birds are far, far away, okay? So that'll make some difference. You don't have to worry about in details. So there's two ways of grouping it. Taxonomy versus cladistics. Okay. Oh, okay, that's it. So that's it for chapter 18. So I uploaded summary for chapter 17 and 18. Homework is only for chapter 18. So next week, you should bring all the homeworks, okay, up to now, up to chapter 18. And I'll go through all the chapter from 11 to 18. Okay, meanwhile, you can read chapter summary, solve the questions, and get ready for the final, okay?